The Greatest Scientists of All Time, Episode 1. Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer and the Atomic Age. He was born in 1904 and died in 1967. The effort made to create an atomic bomb during World War II was directed by American theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. There is general agreement, wrote Gerald Holton, that no one else could have managed the large group of first-rate scientists gathered at Los Alamos so well under difficult and panic-provoking war conditions. Oppenheimer later became an important representative to the international scientific community, but in the 1950s, he lost much of his influence with the government. He opposed the arms race that was evolving with the Soviet Union and opposed the construction of the hydrogen bomb. Oppenheimer responded to the first A-bomb test explosion in July 1945 with words that became famous. "We knew the world would never be the same anymore." And he recalled a phrase from the Hindu scripture, "Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." His career is a stark illustration of the interrelationship between science, technology, and government goals. J. Robert Oppenheimer was born in April 1904 in New York City, the eldest son of Julius Oppenheimer and Ellie Friedman. Julius, a Jewish immigrant, came from Germany, having arrived in the United States in 1888. He had become a successful merchant. His wife was a teacher and painter. Oppenheimer enjoyed a privileged childhood, having attended the Ethical Culture School, a private school in Manhattan. Like many gifted children, he felt better with adults than with his peers. At the age of 12, he was accepted as a member of the Mineralogical Society of New York, where members imagined from his letters that he was an adult. He had an extraordinary memory, learned a number of languages in high school, and graduated in 1921, being the speaker of the tour. At Harvard University, which he attended despite prevailing anti-Semitism, Oppenheimer initially took a course in chemistry, but under the influence of Percy Bridgman, he became interested in physics before graduating from summa cum laude. In 1925, Oppenheimer became an associate of the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, but his stay in England was not a happy one, as it was marked by a period of emotional instability. He, however, learned that he was not a researcher and henceforth concentrated on theoretical physics. Upon transferring to the University of Göttingen in 1926, Oppenheimer met some of the main characters who reshaped the theory of quantum mechanics: Max Born, Werner Heisenberg, and Wolfgang Pauli. After receiving his PhD in 1927, Oppenheimer remained in Europe and went on to be one of the first to work on quantum theory, applied to electrodynamics. His most important work with Max Born led to the development of a theory of molecular behavior that came to be called the Born-Oppenheimer approximation. It is interesting to note that Born found the young Oppenheimer arrogant and disliked him. By the time Oppenheimer returned to the United States in 1929, he was reputed to be America's leading authority on the new quantum physics, holding the position of professor at both the University of California, Berkeley, and the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena. Oppenheimer eventually became an exceptional professor who attracted a large number of successful graduate students and postdoctoral associates. According to his friend Hans Bethe at Caltech, Oppenheimer created the best school of theoretical physics the United States had ever had. He bought a farm in New Mexico and cultivated the image of a farmer, compensating for a weakening he had had as a young man. During the 1930s, Oppenheimer's scientific contributions included significant papers on the theory of the positron, the first antiparticle, the counterpart of the electron, which Paul Dirac had predicted in 1930, and which was only verified experimentally in 1932. In general, Oppenheimer demonstrated the ability to imagine the relationship between theoretical and experimental physics, which was of great use to him, becoming the main task of his career. With the outbreak of World War II in Europe, he reflected on the construction of a nuclear fission bomb. This idea gained strength when the United States entered the war in late 1941. By that time, Oppenheimer had already begun nuclear research, and one of his first accomplishments was the estimation of the amount of uranium, isotope U-235, needed to make an atomic bomb. At the end of 1942, Oppenheimer became director of the new research units at Los Alamos, a high-security laboratory associated with the Scientific Research and Development Division, where the atomic bomb was developed and built. Oppenheimer gained the trust of scientists, even the many émigrés from Europe, and his ability to obtain practical results from theory impressed the U.S. military. Despite not having an administrative background, showed considerable organizational capacity and understanding how to efficiently coordinate work with universities. Known by the code name Mr. Bradley, he directed the operations of about 4,500 people. The problem for the government was Oppenheimer's political conscience. Until the beginning of the war, he considered himself a pacifist. On July 16, 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the Fat Man bomb, the first nuclear bomb, was detonated in the New Mexico desert, melting the sand and creating a huge crater. Oppenheimer belonged to a group of 4 scientists who recommended, after some consideration, that the bomb be used against Japan, a decision he later regretted. On August 6th, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, followed 3 days later by a second bomb on Nagasaki. By August 10th, the war had ended with Japan's surrender. The death toll from the 2 atomic bombs stood at about 140,000 in 1945, and something like 60,000 additional deaths caused by the long-term effects that were felt over the next 5 years. In 1946, Oppenheimer received the Presidential Medal of Merit, awarded by Harry S. Truman. He remained for a time an important executor of science policy, and, as the sociologist Philip Redfield put it, became the symbol of the new status of science in American society. His face and figure, thin and elegant, replaced Einstein as the public image of the genius. However, Oppenheimer opposed the creation of more nuclear weapons. At a meeting, he told Truman, "I have blood on my hands." This led the president to define Oppenheimer as a crybaby scientist and to declare, "Don't ever bring me here again, that asshole." Wasn't he the one who fired that bomb? I did it. This kind of whining makes me sick. In 1947, Oppenheimer was appointed director of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, and stayed there for the end of his life. He was chairman of the board of the Committee of Advisors to the Atomic Energy Commission from 1947 to 1952, and as such came into conflict with proponents of increasing U.S. nuclear weapons. He did not appreciate the increasingly paranoid style of the American government and advocated a policy of openness rather than secrecy. Oppenheimer was in favor of peaceful applications for nuclear power and reduced expenditure for weapons research, basically in line with the views of Niels Bohr and many other European physicists. Being a well-spoken critic, Oppenheimer clashed with the military. Unlike his friend and colleague at Princeton, John von Neumann, who served the Army generals well, Oppenheimer treated them with contempt, even being sarcastic, which generated enmity in him. In retaliation for his anti-militarist stance, Oppenheimer found himself harassed with accusations of disloyalty, and a campaign was mounted against him within the Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC. In 1953, the AEC suspended his security clearance, an action that would effectively remove him from the position of advisor. At a hearing in 1954, he had the support of several fellow scientists, testifying about his integrity and loyalty, with the exception of the important Edward Teller. Moreover, in the climate of defiance against the Reds in the 1950s, Oppenheimer was not able to overcome the suspicion caused by his affiliations with leftists as a university professor. Not only did he lose his security clearance, but he was also vilified in the popular press. He defended himself as best he could through lectures and books like Science and Common Understanding, published in 1954, and Open Mind in 1955. He continued to teach at Princeton, despite no longer doing original research. A certain rehabilitation happened under JFK, and his food for thought prefaces to the French and German editions of his selected writings, There and Oblique, in 1963. During his life, Oppenheimer developed a keen interest in the world outside of physics. He was engaged in psychoanalysis, studied Sanskrit and ancient Greek. His mild
Catherine Perning Harrison, whom he married in 1940, had been the widow of a communist hero. Killed in the Spanish Civil War, it was only in the changed world of the 1950s that this cosmopolitan position brought him problems. Oppenheimer's generosity was remarkable. He often hosted parties for students and invited them to dinners at great restaurants. Oppenheimer had become so popular with his students that they sometimes imitated his style, his accent, and his pipe. The latter proved fatal. In 1966, he was diagnosed with throat cancer and died on February 18, 1967.